FTL Faster Than Light, released in 2012, was the first game developed by Subset Games, followed in 2018 by Into the Breach. Both games are similar enough to compare, but different enough to each be unique. They both look similar enough, carry some of the same themes, and play somewhat similar as well, both of them being roguelikes, you being able to unlock some new choices for different runs. FTL is a spaceship management and combat simulation game. The game is played mainly in a plausible real-time spaceship duel, while managing your crew and keeping your ship in working order during the fight. There's also the exploring of the sector and upgrading of your ship and its equipment. Sporting a pixel art style, which sadly limits it to 720p in resolution, though Into the Breach also has a pixel art style, but that resolution is scalable. A great soundtrack and some good writing, FTL can be a real punch in the gut if you don't expect the difficulty it comes with. In a universe where you're constantly being chased by an unstoppable rebel fleet that would put Star Wars to shame, with pirates hiding behind every beacon ready to drink from your skull, aliens waiting to feast on your brains and scavengers hoping to loot your wreckage, it's not very easy to make it to the end. And even if you get there, the final boss is pretty fucking insane. While FTL's reliance on RNG, which I'll get into soon enough, makes it feel like you're playing at slot machines or rolling the dice, Into the Breach feels more akin to a game of chess. A heavily modified and skewed version of chess, but chessy nonetheless. Into the Breach then is focused on its turn-based combat on an 8-square grid map with different layouts and enemies for every fight, trying to protect the civilians and grid buildings on the map, together with some optional objectives for more rewards, while keeping your pilots and mechs alive in the process, with the overarching goal of stopping the alien threat, while upgrading your mechs and getting new equipment and pilots along the way. There's not really a managing aspect to Into the Breach. You do upgrade your mechs, but in general, combat and progression is more separated than in FTL, in the sense that you don't have to repair your mechs or heal your pilots when the battle is won. Either they die, or they don't. Progression still impacts your power, however. Due to the small number scale, 1 HP extra for one of your mechs can make all the difference in the world, as does 1 more damage on a weapon or 1 more tactical option. With you trying to save a specific timeline version of Earth every new game and saving as much infrastructure and civilians during your operations, Into the Breach can get quite bleak, like FTL. But that's what FTL is all about, on some level. As mentioned, you're basically the last hope for a crumbling Federation being overrun by rebels. You must survive and push through to relay information about the rebel flagship to the last bastion of the Federation, and you're working towards that final standoff with said flagship the entire run. You go through about 8 sectors, usually having a choice between a few different ones, some hostile, some friendly, some filled with ancient danger or spooky aliens, and those choices do bear weight. Civilian sectors pose a lesser risk, but lesser rewards from fights, since you'll just be fighting less in general. While hostile sectors are more difficult to go through relatively unscathed, but your loot options are more numerous. There are also Nebula Sectors. Nebula Sectors can go fuck themselves. There are even sector-specific events for the different race-themed sectors, which rewards exploring and trying something new. You unlock the Mantis cruiser by following a quest through the Mantis homeworld sector, for instance. There are 2 gameplay loops that feed into each other: the combat and all that surrounds and supports it. It's all about making choices. Do I risk going the long way around to explore more beacons for more scrap and other rewards? Let's hope the rebel fleet doesn't catch up in the meantime, or I suffer setbacks that leave me more helpless than before, like jumping to a beacon next to a sun, having half my crew being cooked alive and the other half fighting off boarding survivors from the last ship that jumped here, having just gone through the events of the movie Sunshine. Do I risk looking for a shop to repair, or do I make a beeline for the exit? Best hope there even is a shop in the sector, or if there was one, that it's not already claimed by the rebels. Otherwise, it's a wild goose chase, and I don't even have Untitled Goose Game. Do I go to a more hostile sector, resulting in potentially more fights for more scrap or even more weapons, or a less hostile sector, allowing some reprieve, but leading to me potentially missing out on enough scrap to upgrade my reactor and get that extra weapon or shield later online? Do I save up my scrap that I finally got through blood, sweat and tears, and hope that the next shop sells a good weapon or augmentation, or do I invest in more shields and power? Not that waiting for a shop will matter much if I can't even defend myself on my way there. As you can probably tell, FTL is an uphill battle. Most ships you encounter will be about the same power level as you, and often even above it, I found. Choice also comes from what build you're going for. I'll get into some of the different weapons soon, but they need to complement each other well enough for you to even stand a chance in the end game. Either your weapons on their own, or supported by hacking or combat droids, mind control, invisibility or other support possibilities. Into the Breach also uses choice as a big part of its gameplay, mainly in deciding which missions to attempt, since every island will always end in a boss fight when there's 3 sectors left, so you have to filter out the ones you want, also differing in risk and reward. Here the ultimate objective is also to survive, this time through the 4 islands instead of 8 sectors, rising steadily in difficulty and rewards, with a final big fight looming overhead. The 4 islands always have the same theme, the same types of enemies and level hazards, but once you conquer them in one timeline, you'll be able to choose which ones to go at first, and you don't even have to clear all 4 every game to attempt the last fight. Once you clear 2 islands, you can already attempt the final fight, which will scale to your difficulty, of course. There's a choice to be made here as well. If you feel like you're ready, it shortens your run, allows for some achievements to be gained, and kind of makes you feel like a boss as well. With the shop only being available once at the end of every island, and it mainly being randomized each time, it could be that you barely gain any new weapons or useful equipment on your final 2 islands, while the difficulty certainly won't hold back. You can always buy extra grid defense, which is basically your HP, and reactor cores, which are basically talent points. So an extra cleared island is never truly wasted, but not getting an epic new weapon at the end of it can feel a bit eh. Not every choice in FTL is as viable as the next. You need enough firepower to get through 4-layer shields. There's no way around it. Unless you rely on teleporting crew on board and killing all of the enemies, which is a huge risk in and of itself, since there's a cooldown to port them back. Missiles pierce through shields though, except super shields, but they use up physical missiles you must keep in stock. Same with drones and drone parts, which you also have to keep in stock, but they all cost scrap. The drones are powerful and reusable, so it makes sense for them to be consumables, as it does for missiles, and drones need power as well, as do missile weapons. Fuel depletes as well and must be replenished through either combat and looting enemy ships, or from encounters like NPCs giving you fuel, or shops where you can buy fuel with scrap. There's no limit or weight system, so every jump just costs 1 fuel. So the more you explore for potential rewards, the more fuel you'll have to buy or scavenge to not get stranded along the way. Into the Breach, however, doesn't have this problem. You could, in theory, win the final fight with just your starting setup. It won't be easy, but the way the combat works makes it possible. You always see what move the enemy is planning next. Always. There's no random chance they suddenly change their mind when it's their turn, so you can always see in advance what you have to work around. The only randomness in the combat in Into the Breach is found in the enemy spawns, what type of enemy spawns, and what targets the enemy attacks, and what gear you get from drop pods. While FTL has a lot more RNG, especially in its combat, but also in its exploration. Every beacon you reach in FTL is like a Pandora's box you open. You could face a situation to either help civilians by giving them your supplies, or saving ships from pirates hoping they'll reward you for it, or a space station about to blow up with just enough time to save someone, possibly losing a crewmate in the process if the outcome is negative. Even once you start recognizing certain events, the same choice doesn't always have the same results. Aiding a refugee coming aboard on your ship could result in just a fight with the ship trying to capture them and a new crew member and some loot, or it could be a trap, and you enter the fight with some ship systems damaged or sabotaged, and some shit on the floor instead of a new helping hand. Some events even have special interactions depending on what equipment and crew you have, always marked in blue so you'll never miss them, and these are usually the best and most efficient options. A lot of different encounters follow this logic, rewarding diverse setups. Some events can be traps, a potential great reward, but a potential huge loss, so it's all about taking risks, weighing your options, all in service of that final fight looming overhead. Into the Breach does lack these types of colorful events in favor of a meatier storyline and lore being sprinkled around in the levels themselves and with the interactions with the CEOs and your pilots. It's also very clear what type of challenge a mission will bring, since you can literally see the map before you choose it. Objectives are also laid out nicely, as well as the rewards you'll get. The rewards consisting of either power, which is the HP of your run basically, and reputation, which functions as a type of currency to spend once you finish the island in the shop, on either new equipment, new pilots, or power cores and grid energy. Power cores being the main way of improving your setup, by improving existing equipment, allowing new equipment, or buffing your mechs themselves with more HP or movement points. Both FTL and Into the Breach are roguelikes, I think at least. I found that there's always a lot of murkiness when defining genres, especially roguelikes and roguelites. In FTL, when you die, you have to start over. But it is possible to unlock different ships and layouts. The main plot point of Into the Breach is you being a force of time travelers, so you restarting a game and the missions differing each time makes perfect sense, since you're always in a new timeline. You also get to keep a pilot, if one survives at least, and unlock new mech teams as you earn currency, by completing certain objectives with a specific mech team, which are achievements basically. In FTL, the way you unlock the extra layouts for your ships is by completing special feats or again achievements with them, like repairing from 1 HP to full with the original Kestrel. Completing 2 out of 3 of these challenges unlocks the B layout. The C layouts are exclusive to the Advanced Edition and require you to reach the final sector with the B layout and Advanced mode enabled. The Advanced Edition is free, by the way. It was a massive update for the base game and adds a ton of new encounters, new races, ships, layouts, mechanics. They even brought in Chris Avallone, a celebrated writer for games like Planescape Torment, Fallout New Vegas, and more recently the new Prey and Divinity Original Sin 2. He's also a writer for Into the Breach. In general, FTL is a great game. I have a lot of fun with it. It has a lot of amazing events, very tense fights, real choices, strategy and tactics, but the main issue with the game is randomness. Now, there are pros and cons to randomness in game systems in any game, and people who are for and against more or less RNG. The thing with randomness in FTL is there's a few types, as I mentioned. There's the randomness of the outcome of events, which can at most damage your hull, lose you some items or even a crew member. There's also the randomness of shops. In about every sector you usually have at least 1 to 2 shops, but the random placement can mean that you don't find one at all. And once you reach the shop, there can be up to 2 pages of a combination of new systems, like cloaking or drone control, drones themselves, new weapons, crew members and or augmentations. The main thing is, not every shop sells weapons. Not every shop sells augmentations either, it's always a bit random. Some shops have 1 page, some have 2 pages. So, not every shop sells weapons, and without weapons, you're pretty much fucked. Every sector, enemies grow stronger. They gain more and more powerful weapons, more shield bars, and use different, more annoying tactics. Some slug ships in the Nebulas can disable your oxygen and use fire beams and missiles, trying to disable your shields, set your ship on fire to burn and suffocate your crew to death, while themselves having 3 or 4 shield bars you have to go through. You can't win a fight unless you can either get through or negate enemy shields. And this isn't nearly as big of an issue in Into the Breach, since your biggest asset is your mind and your tactic abilities. Employing strategy, forward thinking and planning are your major weapons. And as long as you have some form of ground control, like pushing, pulling or stunning enemies, you'll be able to save whoever you want, which is usually the main objective, surviving and protecting. You're fighting a war of attrition and you are losing. The only hope is to find the nest of the Vec and destroy it, not by blowing up the daddy alien 3 times, but by protecting the bomb that does it for you after you warp it back through time. There's never an enemy you actually have to kill to win the game. It would be nigh impossible doing it like this, but all objectives are optional, aside from you surviving and the grid holding, of course. All the different mechs and weapons allow you to tackle your objectives in different ways. You can go all out offensive and kill every enemy you see, shield civilian buildings, or simply push enemies and such out of the way or into the water. You can light forests on fire or conjure up dust storm, or even judo throw your enemies overhead and RKO them straight into the ocean. FTL also has a lot of weapon variety to try and counteract the enemy's defenses. There's lasers in different varieties, with burst lasers being especially handy for shredding shields, and hull lasers for dishing out a lot of damage once those shields are down. Missiles that penetrate shields completely but are costly and can miss as well. Flak cannons, beam weapons, bombs, drones, and even some special weapons, all of them with their own selling points and drawbacks. The way the weapon system and your ship in general works puts quite a leash on all of this, however. You only have 4 weapon slots to use. You also have a maximum amount of potential power to send to those weapons. So you can't use 4 weapons needing 4 energy each, because that would be quite overpowered. It's part of the challenge of the game, balancing and choosing which build to go for. Since upgrading your systems and reactors costs scrap, it's highly unlikely you'll get a full array of weapons, let alone with enough defenses to stay alive long enough to fire them more than once. Into the Breach has a similar system, each mech only having 2 slots and a cap on the amount of power cores per mech, so you'll never be able to upgrade both weapons fully and your mech itself as well. This makes sense, of course, putting a cap on your power level. Both the games are about cleverly using the pieces you do have to complete the puzzle, not about saving the pieces up and crushing the puzzle under its own weight. So back to randomness. Evasion Rating FTL is the main culprit in combat itself. If you get lucky enough to have a good enough setup to fight the final boss, the right equipment to pierce his shields, damage his most threatening systems and deal damage to the hull itself, it all has to hit in the end as well. Since weapons have to charge up for quite a while, seeing your Pegasus missile that took 20 seconds to charge miss the enemy's shield system with your last missile, with your Ion Blast missing for the 4th time in a row, and you getting shredded by the enemy's systems that you couldn't disable, it doesn't feel very fair. That is, if you even have the right setup to get through those shields in the first place. If you never came across a missile weapon, or when you did and you didn't have the funds to buy it in the shop, you'd better have enough burst fire to get through those 4 shields at once, and enough shots left to hit the actual shield system itself. Even if you do have a missile weapon, aside from being able to miss, the enemy could also have defense drones, which shoot down missiles or even your laser fire, depending on what version of defense drone they have. Or they could even have 2 of those defense drones. So neither your missile nor laser shots can hit when you fire them at the same time. Ergo, you are fucked. Again, Into the Breach sidesteps these problems completely by eliminating randomness completely, showing you all the moves beforehand and not allowing any attacks to miss. It's more comparable to something like chess in that way. FTL relying on randomness for part of its difficulty isn't necessarily a bad thing though. Randomness is inherent to everything. You can't predict life. And sometimes you get dealt a bad hand and you have no possibility to turn a shitfest into a gold mine. The best tip I can give you is probably don't expect to win. It's simply not possible every run in FTL. FTL is a great game, don't get me wrong. Trying to unlock all the different ships and layouts can be a real fun challenge and journey, and the events especially are a lot of fun to go through thanks to the Advanced Edition. Into the Breach has a lot more leeway in how you approach the game. Every build is viable as long as you have the skills to execute it well. And you can even skip the last 2 islands to allow you to challenge yourself, or allow you to skip ahead when you've already got a perfect build. Each island having its own mechanics, biomes, layouts and even enemies also allows for some fun variety and unique challenges. And being able to choose from all 4 once you've been there already in a previous playthrough allows you to go straight for the ones you like the most or avoid the ones you hate the most. All in all, both games are very polished and a lot of fun with a decent chunk of replayability. Into the Breach feels more polished, but FTL seems to have more meat to its bones, thanks to the Advanced Edition, no doubt. Both the games I highly recommend, and as long as you try and try again, you'll succeed either way. whether it's partially through dumb luck in FTL or through tactical brilliance in both of the game. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.